Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission, as always, is to take some really challenging source material, cut through the noise, and, find the truth of how things are actually working.
Mm-hmm.
And today, we're getting into an idea that is, well, it's genuinely counterintuitive. We spend so much time talking about what the future might look like.
What changes are coming?
Exactly, what we should prepare for. But the sources we have in front of us today, they're not about forecasting at all. They're about diagnosing the present.
Right.
The core idea is that this profound, global structural shift, it hasn't just started. It has already occurred.
The environment has already changed. We're just now realizing the air feels different.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because if the world has already changed, it means we're trying to run, a 20-year-old operating manual on a brand new piece of hardware.
And it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So we have to toss out that old manual and figure out the new baseline.
And that's a critical constraint for this entire deep dive. The sources are really insistent on this. Our analysis has to be purely descriptive. We are not here to create alarm or push for some kind of action or make any moral judgment.
Better or worse?
None of that. Our job is just to observe, to map the terrain of where we're already standing.
And we also need to be clear on the cause, right? This isn't just a recession.
No, it's not about a recession or people suddenly being lazy or some kind of generational value shift. The change is structural, fundamentally structural.
Meaning?
Physical and systemic limits have been hit. That has imposed a new, unavoidable baseline on everyone. And we have to fix that point first before we can go anywhere else.
So we're not waiting for a change. We're analyzing the world after the change. Where do we even begin with that? The sources talk about a breakdown in the computational conditions of society. That sounds incredibly abstract. What does that actually mean?
It's the basic algorithm society was running on for decades, the mechanism that let us process inputs and reliably get certain outcomes. The old rule set, the one we all grew up with, was based on this high-speed, nonlinear calculation. It looks something like this. Information, judgment, value.
Give me a concrete example of that calculation working in the old system.
Sure. You take certain information, let's say getting a specific college degree. You apply judgment choosing a career in what looks like a growing industry.
Right.
And the system would reliably generate value, a stable job, an upwardly mobile life. The whole infrastructure, from student loans to the housing market, was built assuming that conversion rate was always going to be positive and fast.
Though growth was just baked into the cake.
It was a fundamental prerequisite. It wasn't just a goal. It was the assumed state of things. And that assumption allowed you to do things like plan your life decades in advance. You felt like you could actually draw your future.
And you could look backwards and make it all make sense.
Exactly. You could construct a neat personal narrative. All your random choices suddenly look like a coherent, smart life story because the system always trended up and out. It validated your past decisions.
But that's the calculation that broke down. And the sources are very clear. It wasn't an ideological shift. So what failed?
It was physical, mechanical, really.
Not a change of mind.
No. We talk about abstract systems, but those systems run on concrete things. We hit the physical limits first.
Like what?
In global logistics, in how we designed our cities, which couldn't scale indefinitely, in energy systems and demographics, the sheer number of people in certain age brackets, and, crucially, in the inertia of our formal institutions. They just couldn't adapt fast enough.
So the hardware, to use your earlier analogy.
The hardware reached its maximum speed, its thermal limit. It just couldn't support that old high-speed calculation anymore, the one that guaranteed information would turn into expanding value.
So the system didn't stop because we got tired of it. It stopped because the roads, the power grids, the number of workers, they literally could not go any faster.
It was an involuntary slowdown, an operational environment breakdown.
The software is trying to run, but the machine is overheating.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's not a philosophical problem, it's a mechanical one.
And that distinction is so important because you can't fix it by just thinking differently or writing a new economic theory. And this leads to what the sources say is a very counterintuitive result. The world isn't having a dramatic collapse.
No.
It's shrinking quietly.
And this is where we have to introduce a key term from the sources. It's a bit of jargon, but it's essential. Degenerative stabilization.
Okay, break that down for us.
We use a special term because words like decline or collapse make you think of, sudden chaos, total fragmentation, an apocalypse movie.
Right, an external shock, something hitting us.
Exactly. Degenerative stabilization is different. It means the system is quietly reducing its own capacity. It's shrinking, but it's also remaining stable.
The reduction is coming from the inside.
From its own structural limits. It's not being destroyed from the outside. It's just settling into a lower, less expansive state of equilibrium.
Why is that word stabilization so important if everything is getting smaller?
Because the system isn't flying apart into a million pieces, it's settling down uniformly. And that's precisely why this whole shift is so hard for us to see clearly.
We're wired to look for a big crisis.
We expect to see riots in the streets, hyperinflation, some huge dramatic event. But if the world is just quietly stabilizing at a lower level, there's no obvious drama to point to.
So the only real evidence is that feeling.
Yeah.
That pervasive gut instinct that things are just fundamentally different than before, even if you can't name the specific event that changed them.
Precisely. And this quiet shrinkage, this degenerative stabilization, it changes the function of major parts of our society. The sources point to three big structural shifts.
Okay, let's take them one by one. What happens to big cities in this new environment?
Well, cities used to be designed as engines of growth. Their purpose was to accelerate everything: wealth, innovation, population.
Right.
Under degenerative stabilization, that function changes. They become more of a symbol and a storage operating system, an OS for storage.
Meaning they're not creating new growth so much as managing what's already there.
They still hold immense value, the infrastructure, the capital, but they're less effective at generating massive new expansion. They're preserving what they have.
They become reservoirs of past growth, not engines for future growth.
That's a great way to put it. Now, apply that same logic to the economy as a whole.
The old system saw the economy as the primary expansion apparatus.
Engineered to just scale up forever. In this new environment, its main job shifts. It becomes a defense apparatus.
Defending what?
Defending the existing system. Its primary function moves from aggressive scaling to risk mitigation. You see this everywhere. More systemic hoarding, institutions becoming more rigid, a focus on protecting profitability instead of taking huge risks on innovation.
Like companies doing stock buybacks instead of building new factories.
A textbook example. You're defending the present value, not gambling on an expanding future.
Which brings us to the third shift. Life planning itself. That used to be a long-term design project.
It's now rapidly shortening. The old system was built for 30-year plans: mortgages, careers, retirement.
But when that core calculation breaks down, you can't reliably project value that far out.
So life planning shifts from that long-term design to basically monthly and weekly management.
You stop worrying about 2050 and start focusing on making rent this month and next month.
That's the most personal, intimate way this structural shift shows up in your life. Your focus becomes the immediate reproducibility of your existence.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because we can stop being purely theoretical. The analysis uses Japan as a specific reference frame for this global shift, a preceding observation point.
And we have to be extremely careful with this point. This is a vital context constraint.
This isn't a cultural argument.
Absolutely not. We are not framing Japan as superior or inferior or somehow culturally unique. It just serves as a preceding observation point.
Why then?
Because it hits some of those structural limits, especially demographics and institutional inertia, a bit earlier than most other developed nations.
And what makes it such a good test case is how it happened.
Exactly. The shift occurred without some massive social upheaval. There were no dramatic riots, no total systemic collapse. Japan just transitioned. It moved into this defense phase quietly and uniformly over time.
The pressure was applied evenly without a single big shock.
It's the perfect real-world example of degenerative stabilization. It shows us that hitting these limits doesn't have to cause a dramatic crash. It can just cause this slow, systemic reorientation toward defense.
So if we look at Japan as a kind of structural blueprint, what specific feelings, what kind of time consciousness becomes visible there first?
The sources identify three big ones. First, the core sensation becomes one of living this month. That's your effective planning horizon, because projecting reliably past 4 or 6 weeks becomes incredibly difficult.
That explains that feeling of anxiety a lot of people have. Even when there's no obvious crisis, you're just managing the immediate present. The grand future starts to feel irrelevant.
It does. And that leads to the second sensation, a time consciousness where the future cannot be drawn. You just can't sketch out that stable 20-year life story anymore. That promise from the old calculation is gone.
Okay, and the third?
This one is maybe the most critical structurally. The very idea of security shifts. It moves away from financial how much money you have and toward reproducibility.
Explain that difference, quantity versus reproducibility.
In the old growth system, security meant scale, a bigger paycheck, a larger portfolio, more.
Right.
In a stabilized environment, security is found in consistency. Can you reproduce your life management plan? Can you cover the same expenses, access the same resources next month and the month after that?
So it's the security of consistent function.
Yes, even if the scale is small. That becomes more valuable than chasing a massive scale that could just vanish tomorrow.
So the takeaway from the Japan example isn't about decline, it's about seeing a phase that the rest of the world is now structurally approaching.
It confirms the model. When the old growth assumptions fail, the result can be stabilization through shrinkage, not a big dramatic collapse. It's a quiet erosion of expectation.
This entire analysis, which we're calling LMP-0, is really rooted in this mandate for strict description. So before we wrap up, we have to be really clear about what this framework is not meant to do.
Yes, the boundaries are critical. This analysis will not provide you with solutions or policies.
It's not a how-to guide.
No. It won't tell you how to invest or what career to pick. It's not going to deliver a story of hope or a story of despair. And most importantly, there is no moral evaluation. We're not saying this world is good or bad.
Just that it is.
The sole purpose is to observe, to map and describe the specific human sensations and the change in our sense of time that emerges when the foundation of that previous era gets stressed. We're mapping what happens when the life membrane is sheared.
Can you give us a more accessible metaphor for that, the life membrane?
Think of it as that thin psychological layer of predictability that we all just took for granted. It was the background hum telling you your job will probably exist next year, your rent won't triple overnight, you can get groceries at the store. That membrane was held up by the old, reliable conditions of growth.
And when those conditions broke?
The membrane got stressed. It became fragile, unpredictable. We feel that stress every time a simple calculation we used to make about the future suddenly fails.
Which brings us back to the two foundational premises. The two basal conditions the sources say we have to accept to move forward.
Precisely. Premise number one, this change, this shift to degenerative stabilization is already happening.
It's not a forecast. It's a description of the present.
And premise number two, Japan is already preceding this change. It's our clearest, quietest window into the human experience of this new state. We're not comparing cultures, we're comparing structural phases.
And fixing those 2 points anchors the whole analysis. We've established our new baseline. So what does this all mean for you, our listener? We've spent this time establishing a new baseline, this idea that we are already standing in a new world, one that prioritizes defense and reproducibility over endless expansion.
In this first deep dive, LMP-0, it asks no questions and it provides no answers. Its only job is to fix the point, to say, we are already standing in this world.
We have to let go of the idea that we're planning for a change that's still years away.
The change is here.
So instead of asking, what should I do to stop this, or what policy should I support, the challenge we want to leave you with is observational. Start by just looking at your own environment. What already feels definitively different in your own life compared to, say, 10 years ago?
Right.
What calculation that you used to trust about a career, about buying a home, about stability, has broken down for you personally?
And that exercise, just fixing that point for yourself and accepting these new conditions, that's the necessary preparation. Once that new baseline is established, then we can start to discuss the actual day-to-day sense of living within this new environment.
And that's the discussion for next time.